Hello, Astro Darlings, and welcome to the Golden Astrologer Podcast. This is Deb McBride, and today is Sunday, July 6th in the year 2025. I am recording this in lovely Escazú, Costa Rica, where the birds are chirping, and it is overcast, and maybe it'll rain. I just got back from a trip we took to San Gerardo de Dota, and we just call it Dota for short, and it's up in the mountains of San Jose, up in the cloud forest. So it's a cloud forest, and it's really very beautiful and very chilly, very chilly. So, to give you perspective, those of you who know temperatures in Fahrenheit, it was about 50 degrees up there. And now here it's about 70. And the high today was 77 degrees. So that may not sound like much, but it was, because it was freezing and it felt freezing, and I brought sweaters and it was chilly. But up there, the symbol of Dota, or the symbol you see over and over again, and in fact we saw in life, was the bird known as the Quetzal. And the Quetzal, interestingly enough, and this is a very interesting synchronicity story, the Quetzal is a bird with a very long tail, and they are absolutely stunning birds. And if you've never seen them or heard of them, or seen them like in pictures rather, because most people don't get to go up to the cloud forest of South America, Central America, and see the Quetzal. And we actually saw two of them on Thursday. Now this I wanted to tell you is impossible. They have special tours for you to get up at there at 5:15 in the morning, which I wasn't going to do, to see the Quetzal. Okay, to go up and see the Quetzal. Now they fly at very high altitudes, and they live up in tree barks in the mountains in the cloud forest, and so they are exquisite birds. They are turquoise and red and iridescent green, and they're really, really beautiful. And they are the national bird of Guatemala. And actually, the Quetzal is the denomination, it's their currency in Guatemala. And these birds were considered to be, like the feathers of the birds were valuable to the Aztec and the Maya. So what happened on Thursday was that we were in a local shop, and my friend Alejandro called us over, and he's like, we can see the Quetzal from here. And we were looking in outside the window of this restaurant attached to the shop, and the male was in the tree, and he was, preening himself and floofing his feathers and picking out the feathers. And it was 2:30 in the afternoon. We didn't have to get up for a 5:15 tour to see the bird. So I was very happy about that. But there he was, and it's majestic and such a beautiful, exquisite experience up in the cloud forest, up in the trees, and such a beautiful place where we stayed. And then they told us that the female was in a neighboring tree. So there she was, looking out the window. We saw her, and there she was a little more hidden than he was, and she was doing the same thing, floofing herself and whatever. And apparently they're monogamous birds, so they must have been a couple, although somebody said there had been another female up there. So this was an incredible sighting. And I believe in power animals, and when one sees them, especially a rare one, it's not like you see your neighborhood bird that comes all the time. This is a very special animal. And so this was like, wow, we saw him. And everybody was saying this is really good luck, because they represent abundance and wealth, because the feathers were very valuable to the Aztecs and the Maya. And they used that for currency back then, which is a shame because it was a beautiful bird. But if you had a feather from one of those birds, it was apparently very valuable. And so now in Guatemala, the currency is the Quetzal. But they are related to the Mayan god Quetzalcoatl. And this is all over Mayan art and iconography, and just the experience of the bird and its beauty and its spiritual connection. Well, later that evening, now When I say up in the remote cloud forest, I mean that translates into very little internet. So I had internet in the clubhouse, in the restaurant, in the office, and then when you walked up the hill to your cabin, you had no internet. Except I would go up there at night when everything was still, and there was a teeny weeny little dot of internet on the symbol on my computer. Well, Thursday night, I got my email. Weirdly enough, I got my email, and there were like a couple of emails, and one of them was from Anima Mundi Herbal Apothecary. And because it was Thursday night, it was the night before 4th of July, which was Independence Day in the US. And in this email, they were talking about celebrating, because they're primarily, the woman who owns the company is Costa Rican, but she is primarily in the US with her business. So she sent out an email, or her company sent out an email, and there it was in the email, the picture of the Quetzal, if you can believe it. If you can believe it, there was a picture. It said Happy Spiritual Independence Day, and it says 6 timeless symbols of liberation. And as soon as you open the email, it says symbols of spiritual sovereignty, and there is the Quetzal right after I saw this. So what a powerful synchronicity. This is incredible, right? And then I just couldn't believe it. And they talk about the Quetzal in the email and the feather and how valuable it was. And it's actually called the resplendent Quetzal because of its shimmering iridescent feathers. And the feathers symbolized abundance, truth, and a direct connection to Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity of wind, learning, and light. And so this is a symbol of liberation because the birds fly so high above the mountains. And then there's a mythology, and the bird is very strong symbol in Mesoamerican mythology. So, there is a mythology about freeing the bird and the bird being, a symbol of liberation and fortune and abundance. Well, I couldn't believe that I got this email the day I actually saw one in my life. I've never seen this bird before. So I showed my friend Monica and I said, look at this. And she says, no. How did this happen at breakfast Friday morning? And I showed this to her. She said, that's incredible. And so this is, and then I kept seeing that bird. I saw it the other day. I saw it we went to a coffee fair, and I saw the bird was all over, like this one section at the coffee fair. They had scarves with the bird, water bottles, all sorts of things with the Quetzal. If you've never viewed one, just even in culture, I would recommend looking it up online because it's really an exquisite bird. But liberation was a theme, of course, because it was 4th of July, and they were talking about that. And in the email that I got from Anima Mundi Herbals, Quetzalcoatl was associated with the planet Venus, which is interesting because it's all about liberation. And when I think of liberation planetarily, I think about, obviously, Uranus. So, because that's the great awakener and the great liberator. And so here I am, after that long story about mythology, here I am to tell you about Uranus, because that is the big aspect of the week, or the big astrological moment of the week. Tonight, while I am sleeping, and while many of the people in the world are sleeping, Uranus will enter the sign of Gemini. And it goes into Gemini at 3:45 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday the 7th. So in the middle of the night, it'll be 1:45 a.m. for me, Uranus will enter the sign of Gemini. And so there's a lot to say about this and a lot to talk about because of Uranus going into a new sign for the first time in years. And this indeed is the first time Uranus has been in Gemini since its last run through that sign from 1941 to 1949. Now, I don't need to tell you historically what happened during that time. You know what happened during that time. The aftermath was included in that. And so, it does not mean we're definitely, absolutely, positively in World War III, because the last time this happened was World War II. But there is going to be a collective unconscious reverberation from Uranus changing signs. Now it's going to stay there till November 7th, and then it will go back into the sign of Taurus, and it'll stay there till next year, and then it will go out again, and then for good. It will go back into Gemini for good next year. We don't have to think about that right now. We just need to focus on the present, where we are, Uranus, in the last moments of Taurus before it goes into Gemini. And so I've been talking about this for a while. If you attended my 2025 lecture called The Liminal Labyrinth, you know that I spoke of Uranus and Gemini. And this is a moment, because these planets don't change signs very often. Now, we just had Neptune. We had Pluto go into Aquarius for good last November. And I know I've been saying this a lot, but I can't emphasize this enough. Outer planets changing signs are changes in the fabric of our society and our culture. They are collective unconscious shifts. They are not to be taken lightly, because ultimately they show a different perspective in our culture. And we are not used to, we're not used to changes of this magnitude happening again and again. November, March, April, May, June, July. This is all big stuff. It's too much at once, and our collective unconscious minds are having complications with this, which is why the world seems nuts right now. I've said this before too. We have to sort of integrate this. It is a period of integration. That's what the good thing about the retrograde is. We get a taste, it goes away, it comes back. We start to really process that big change. It's like, okay, we're preparing you to change. It's like, okay, I'm moving houses. But when I move houses, I have to move between the two houses. I have to take my belongings from one house and put it in another. That's what we're kind of doing. We're absorbing what this cultural shift brings us. Now, we step back, we finish up our chores of the last situation, Uranus and Taurus, and then we go back and stay there for good. It's like when you're moving and you have to go back and forth between the two homes until you've got everything you have from the old place into the new place. And so this is a very deep and profound moment. Uranus takes 84 years to go around the zodiac. And like I said, it was there in the 40s. So if you have parents or relatives born in the 40s, they have Uranus and Gemini. What does that look like? Uranus is the planet of genius, brilliance, liberation, freedom, revolution. And so wherever Uranus goes, there's often revolution. There's Uranus, in Virgo, which I was born with. And of course, there was a revolutionary time in the years I was born, in the year I was born, and then the ones following. But it was also because it was Pluto, and it was in Virgo. So Virgo is the, your typical regular normal society, and then Uranus comes along and blows it all up. That's where we've sort of been with Taurus. But Gemini is a different animal. Gemini is really about the experience of our intellect, our mind, our mental capabilities, our capacity to understand and learn, and, it's ruled by Mercury. So if you're someone with a Uranus-Mercury thing going on in your chart, like I do, I have a Uranus-Mercury trine, you're going to understand this, you're going to feel this very clearly. Mercury and Gemini are about, our neighborhood, our siblings, our intellect, what we use to communicate, how we communicate, how we speak to one another, how we network, how we get around the neighborhood, what's in our neighborhood. Do we like our neighborhood? Do we want to change our neighborhood? It's riding your bike around the neighborhood and waving to your friends. That's a whole Gemini scenario, That's what's going to be affected by Uranus. So Uranus in Gemini has a lot to do with the way we are already communicating with each other on a very technological level. And then we've got Pluto and Aquarius. So that's two things in air signs, and they are very sweetly talking to one another right now. And I really believe, we don't even know what's in front of us as far as what's coming for us to use in an electronic technological sense. There's going to be discoveries like we've never seen before. Flying cars, I doubt it, but we're really going to start using things in a much more mundane experience. Gemini's more mundane than Aquarius. So, people are starting to use AI every day. I've been using AI for years because my new vision system is AI. And people say, "Oh, AI," but it's been around since the 50s, But we're going to get more and more used to things that have technological components to them, with more than even what we have now. 30 years ago, you weren't really communicating through video phone, right? You weren't FaceTiming. You were just learning what an email was, okay? So now think about it, how fast technology has grown, how fast we've adapted to it. And Gemini is a sign of adapting and being flexible because it's a mutable sign. So this whole nature of this Uranus going into Gemini is asking us to be lightning fast adaptable. And we have to sort of wake up to that. And it is a very interesting dynamic because Pluto was not in Aquarius the last time Uranus was in Gemini back in the 40s. So we're getting a whole other perspective of what our daily lives are going to look like with these planets talking to one another and giving us a whole new perspective. Now, frankly, I think this is a great opportunity to raise your consciousness level and to start doing things that are going to put your mind in a very useful place. Like Gemini, I know I have a Gemini moon. We could run the same story over and over in our head. We don't want to do that. We want to use our brain and our mind for some higher level stuff, consciousness, awareness, conversations, meditations, reaching beyond our current level of understanding. And I think our level of understanding, by the time all this is over in 8 years, and Pluto will still be in Aquarius, but they will have talked to each other enough so that we have something profound to really reach out to one another and to maybe the deeper recesses of our mind, if we choose to. You may not want to. There are plenty of people who won't be affected by this in an obvious way. Everyone's affected by it. It's a collective energy. It's a collective planet. But this is something that we want to take advantage of. We want to use this for our knowledge and learning. Okay? And again, that bird, the Quetzal, is also a symbol of knowledge and learning. So I think that we have to start awakening ourselves and using what is available to us in our lives in a more profound way, especially these astrological aspects. And I recommend that you get your astrology chart read if you don't know where this is happening for you, because you want to use this to the best of your ability, especially since it's going to be speaking to Pluto very nicely, Uranus and Pluto. So, and if you're born in the 60s, you have a Uranus-Pluto conjunction. And usually like from 1963 till 1969, you have a Uranus-Pluto conjunction. And this is important because when these two planets talk to each other in the sky, as they did in like 2012 through 2015, they were squaring each other. It was an on and off thing that was going on with them squaring, just the way it was an on and off conjunction back in the 60s. So when those two get together in a hard aspect like a square, as they did back in 2013, 2014, they were creating more of a crisis point or a definite turnaround or a definite what are you doing now for the people who live with Uranus and Pluto in contact in their astrological charts, especially the people born in the 60s. I say this to that group of individuals, of which I'm one, that the trine between the two of them, Uranus and Pluto, is going to bring a smoother transition of those planets and connection of those planets, and perhaps a smoother recognition of purposeful activity in your life. So I think it's important to look at that and look at your life. So if you haven't had your chart read and you don't know where Uranus is going into Gemini, or you don't know where Pluto is going into, has been in Aquarius, and where they're talking to each other, come see me. Come have a session with me. Click book online on my website, thegoldenastrologer.com, and you can set up a session. We can talk about this. It's important for people to know where this is going on. So it's really very profound in this time. So that's part of it. Now, the other thing is that we are having a full moon this week, and that is on Thursday the 10th. And that is at 18 degrees of Capricorn, which means that the sun will be at 18 degrees of Cancer. And so this is the only full moon in Capricorn we're having this year. And so that is something that we want to pay attention to. That's the other big event of this week, one of the other big events of this week. And that full moon is, we're having a full moon in Capricorn, and we're no longer with Pluto in Capricorn, so this is good. But it will be first opposing Jupiter the day before. Jupiter in Cancer, the moon on Wednesday will oppose Jupiter 5:59 p.m. Eastern time, and then it will go into the full moon opposite the sun, which is the 10th on Thursday, like I said, and that occurs at 4:37 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday the 10th. And so that degree of cardinality, that 18 degrees, almost 19 degrees, is going to correspond to about 3 or 4 degrees of mutable signs. So if you have something in Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Gemini at 3 or 4 degrees, you will feel that. Now, Uranus won't be that far along. I doubt it's going to really affect it that much. And Venus has been in Gemini for a little while and will be at 7 degrees on Thursday, so it's not really going to get affected by that. But if you have something at about 3 or 4 degrees of a mutable sign, then you are probably going to feel this full moon very differently. And so that's important to just pay attention to and look out for. The other thing that's going to happen this week, and we've got a pretty big week because Uranus is changing signs, we've got a full moon, and then Saturn changes direction. And depending on where you live, it will be Saturday or Sunday. Now, Eastern time, it will be 12:07 a.m., just after midnight Sunday morning. For me, it'll be a little after 10 p.m. on Saturday night. And so this is another important moment. Now, as you know, as I talked about last week, on this past Friday, the day before yesterday, we had Neptune go retrograde. And Neptune and Saturn are very close together in the sign of Aries. All new, all in the sign of Aries, very new. And they are both turning direction. And Neptune did that Friday. And Sunday, next Sunday, the 13th, we will have Saturn changing direction. And this is something important to pay attention to because they are connected and we are newly in this dynamic. So this is so powerful a week because of all of this, that our experience is one that all of these planets newly in a place are all shifting and changing together. This is all happening within a week. Neptune changes direction. Uranus changes signs. Saturn changes direction. There's a lot of rock and roll this week. And so I expect maybe the news is going to be big this week. There's going to be a lot of information in the news. I expect it may feel somewhat uncomfortable as we process our week. It may feel like we're kind of swirling around. Yesterday, I was saying to myself, why am I so agitated? Like for the first part of the day, I was kind of agitated. And I kept saying, I think it's Uranus. I think it's Uranus leaving one place and moving into another. And I have to say that if you are feeling agitated, it's all this rock and roll. It's all this Uranus moving into a new sign. It's all this Neptune shifting direction, and we're getting ready for Saturn to do that. Remember, they just don't go, oh, pop, it's there. There's a lead up. Neptune slowed down last week. Saturn's slowing down now. And Uranus is in a different place than it was before. It will be in a different place tomorrow than it was before. So there's a lead up. There's a restlessness, an anxiety, discomfort because we're all being pushed out of our comfort zone, and we're all being pushed into some new dynamic, new collective wave of energy. What does this mean for everyone? It means that our lives are probably going to look very different, or we are going to experience ourselves as different people on a certain level. It doesn't mean that if you have a job or a business, you're going to stop and not do it anymore unless you just want to, unless that's really part of your goal. It means that we're dealing with some very strong energies of change and agents of change. And with all the goings on in the world, fighting, wars, sovereignty is always at the core. People want to be liberated. And here we are again with this theme of liberation. And people don't want to be suppressed. People want to express what's going on for them. They want their freedom. They want their liberation. Hello, Saturn and Neptune have gone into Aries. Well, that's not about suppression. We're going to be courageous and march forward. Uranus is going into Gemini. That's about like transmuting the way you get around, the way you communicate, what you call yourself. That's something. And God knows Pluto in Aquarius. That's more about sovereignty. We're talking a lot about this feeling of liberation. Liberation seems to be a greater theme and goal collectively right now. These are not signs that ask us to remain in place. Taurus is more like that. We want to stay a little more traditional in Taurus. But with Uranus plowing through there the last 7 years or so, even that's been shaken up. So we're asked to be more flexible and look at what freedom and liberation mean to us and what does sovereignty mean to us. In the whole grand scheme of things, this means a lot. Freedom means a lot. What happens when you have freedom? Well, when you're financially free, you don't have to worry about where your money's coming from, and you pay your bills and you take care of your family and yourself, and there's no concern about that. That's good liberation, freedom. Yeah, freedom allows you to do things. When you have a freedom of your schedule, you say you work for yourself, you make your hours. There's freedom right there. You don't have to spend all your time in front of your desk, or doing whatever it is you do. You can have a certain amount of freedom. That also comes with financial freedom. Okay, so work and finances. What else? Freedom, if your health is good, you've got a lot of freedom there. You don't have to be, watching out for everything in your life, where you're walking, what you're eating, how you're sleeping. When your health is good, your freedom is intact. We sometimes take freedom for granted, and it's so important to really pay attention and be grateful for how the freedom operates in our lives. So in this Uranus going into Gemini, we're going to want a lot of freedom. Gemini is a mobile sign. Taurus is not so mobile. Gemini is. And Aquarius is more mobile. And so Aquarius with Pluto and Uranus in Gemini, this is something new, probably very refreshing for us. And see where you want to be freer in your life. Again, if you want to look at your astrological chart, it's a good idea right now, because that's going to show up, that Uranus and Gemini is going to show up where you need your freedom and you want your freedom right now. And how do you get there? Okay. We talk about all that in an astrology session. And, when I look at this and I see Saturn and Neptune and Aries, they all jive together smoothly. The Aries component, the Gemini component, the Aquarius component, all of this flows together. And we like this energy flowing together because it allows us to really make our decisions, set our intentions, and reach our goals, right? What do you want to manifest? What do you want to create? And so when, last night I was going to sleep and I'm thinking about all I've created so far in my life and the goals I've reached, and what are the new goals? What are the new goals? What are the things that I want to make happen next? Who do I want to become? Who do I have to become to do all of that? And that's what we have to ask. Who do I want to become? What do I want to achieve, and who do I need to become to do it? Right? So this is something profound and powerful, and it allows us, I see all this Gemini, Aquarius energy, this all allows us to be flexible and mobile and certainly Aries is mobile as well. So there's going to be a little more backtracking as we make decisions about where we've been and where we're going, the transition, the integration, as I mentioned before, between all of these signs moving, these planets moving back and forth between signs. Big, big stuff. Very powerful. And, we're going to get a taste of things this week. So pay attention. Pay attention to your surroundings, what you're feeling, what you're knowing intuitively. Feel into it and understand what's next for you and what you would like to have happen. So, yeah. That's a lot. We've got a lot going on this week. We just had Neptune change direction. We are now getting Uranus a couple days later. We're then going to go to Saturn a few days after that. Neptune and Saturn turning retrograde are asking us to revisit where we've been in these last months. Okay, Uranus is going forward, but Neptune and Saturn are saying, okay, where you been? Where's it been working out for you? Where are you adjusting? Where are you making adjustments? And how's it working for you? So let's see what happens as this unfolds, as the story unfolds, as the world turns, as the Saturn turns. If you would like to find out where all this is happening for you, then consult with me for an astrological session. Like I said, go to my website, thegoldenastrologer.com, and book a session. You can also book a Reiki session there, and that will help you clear out the old, which is what we want to do as things move forward. We help you clear up old beliefs, old contracts, old vows of whatever it may have been, this life, another life. And then there's also expansion mentoring if you want to come work with me long term, and we can do some real deep work over 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, whichever you choose. You can email me about any of this. My email is deb@debmcbride.com or info@thegoldenastrologer.com, and we can discuss what your goals are and what your intentions are and what you'd like to go next with all this big change in the world. I thank you so much for listening. It is a beautiful thing to know that I have so many loyal listeners. Gratitude to each and every one of you. Reach out to me if you need me. I'm on Instagram as well, The Golden Astrologer. And let's see where we wind up. Next time I talk to you, Uranus will be in Gemini. Thank you for listening. Have a beautiful week.